Hokkien, Cantonese, and Hakka, are they languages or dialects? Hello everybody, my name is Timothy, and today we are going to explore a storm in a teacup. The issue of whether Hokkien, Cantonese, Hakka, and maybe Teochew, Hainanese, Shanghainese, and so on, are they languages or dialects, is a source of argument among many people. I have heard this so many times. Some would argue that they are definitely languages. On the other hand, there's another school of thoughts that say that these are all Chinese dialects. These are not languages, these are dialects. Only Mandarin is a Chinese language. So who is correct? This is what we are looking at today. And before I continue, I want to tell you that I have been researching Chinese languages for the past 11 years. I have done independent research on this matter. So what I am about to share with you is the fruit of my research. And it's independent research, but it's research that goes in depth into understanding Chinese languages. So I hope that through today's video, you'll have a takeaway that you'll bring with you, and in future, you'll be able to explain to people when you get into the situation of the question, are these languages or dialects? I hope that you will be the one who will be explaining to them clearly as much as possible so that they can walk away with a clear and new understanding whether Hokkien, Cantonese, Hakka, are they languages or are they dialects? But before we go any further, I will give you the answer. If you say that Hokkien, Cantonese, and Hakka are languages, you are right. Yes, you are right. Hokkien, Cantonese, and Hakka are languages. But hang on. If you say that Hokkien, Cantonese, and Hakka are dialects, are you wrong? Well, I did not say that you are wrong. If you say that Hokkien, Cantonese, and Hakka are dialects, you are also right. Isn't that surprising? Yes, if you say that Hokkien, Cantonese, Hakka, and all the other Teochew, Shanghainese, Hainanese, whatever, they are languages, you are right. But those who say that these are dialects, they are also right. But how can we reconcile that both can be right? I will explain it all. But before we do that, let's listen to an episode of the China podcast, because we are going to let James and Jessica do the explaining about Chinese languages. And then when I come back, I will wrap it up so that you have a clear understanding that why we say these are languages and at the same time these are dialects. And yes, the China podcast is a synthetic podcast. That is to say, I created it using Google Notebook LM. And we are in the age, the dawn of artificial intelligence. It is a dawn of technology which, whenever there is a new technology coming into being, there would be resistance to it. We have seen it when talkies replaces silent movies. We have seen it when color television replaces black and white television. Digital camera replaces analog cameras. And so on. Today, we are seeing the advent of artificial intelligence. In my quest of spreading information, I will always employ cutting-edge technology. And here, I'm presenting to you because, in a way, firstly, I enjoy doing it myself. I enjoy using artificial intelligence. And I know that in 5 years from now, artificial intelligence will be so commonplace that we are going to wonder, why are we resisting it in the first place? It's going to be something very household, very common. So it's best that you embrace artificial intelligence, but with the clarity that the purpose of it is for educational purposes, so that education can be imparted to you clearly. And so, without further talking, let's go on to the China podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We are tackling a big one today, the intricate world of Chinese. Get ready, because we're about to uncover some surprising twists and turns that might just challenge what you thought you knew. I'll be honest, I used to think Chinese was pretty straightforward, one language spoken by a whole lot of people. But the research you sent over tells a very different story, one that feels more like a captivating mystery than a simple definition. So what's the real story?
It's definitely more of a puzzle than people realize. Chinese can refer to Mandarin, the most spoken Sinitic language, but it's also used as this blanket term for a whole family of related languages, and we're talking about differences as big as, say, Spanish and Italian.
Now that you mention it, I have heard people say Chinese and then specify, oh, they speak Cantonese.
Yeah.
It's like saying I speak Romance and then clarifying, oh, I meant Italian. Are they really that different, though?
You got it exactly right. A Mandarin speaker and a Cantonese speaker might not understand a single word the other is saying. And this is where that dialect label gets a little complicated, don't you think? Because dialects usually mean you can kind of understand each other, right?
It definitely makes things more complex. I mean, thinking about like regional dialects I'm familiar with,
Yeah.
I mean, a Bostonian and a Texan might have some colorful differences, but they can still understand each other. This is like a whole other level. So why even call them dialects then? What even makes them Chinese in the first place, beyond just geography?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. See, there's this deep cultural emphasis on a unified Chineseness, this sense of shared heritage and identity. And thinking about these languages as dialects kind of reinforces that idea of unity.
So even on a linguistic level, there's this push for a united front. That's fascinating. Like, how much does politics actually shape the way we define language in general?
It's a huge factor, and it really highlights how language can be intertwined with power dynamics and cultural identity. But it gets even more interesting. There's another layer to this whole puzzle. So while the spoken forms, they vary drastically, most of these dialects, they actually share a common written system using Chinese characters.
Wait, so someone in Beijing and someone in Hong Kong could be reading the same newspaper article, understand the exact same information, but then not be able to talk about it with each other.
Exactly. It's like they're looking at the same, like a musical score, but they're playing totally different melodies. Like take the character for horse, for example. In Mandarin, it's pronounced ma, but in Cantonese, it's mao. Same character, different sound, same meaning.
That's incredible. It really adds a whole other layer to the whole language versus dialect debate. It's definitely not as straightforward as I once thought. So how do we even begin to draw the lines then?
That's the million-dollar question. It's something even linguists struggle with. To really understand it, we need to look past those spoken differences. Let's dive into some specific examples. Have you ever heard of the Wu languages?
I can't say I have. Tell me more.
So the Wu languages are a really fascinating case.
Okay.
They're spoken by millions of people in and around Shanghai.
Wow.
And while they share that written connection, with Mandarin and Cantonese we talked about,
Right.
their spoken forms, they actually diverged from the others centuries ago.
Centuries. Wow. So we're talking about linguistic drift happening over like generations upon generations.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. It really makes you think about how much language evolves, even within like a language family.
Yeah.
Is there anything, I don't know, unique or particularly interesting about the Wu languages themselves?
Well, for one, they're known for having even more tonal variations than Mandarin.
Oh, wow.
So imagine like a language where your tone of voice can completely change the meaning of a word.
Oh, wow.
It's like the linguistic version of a high-stakes opera.
That's officially on my list of things to explore further. This whole like tonal aspect of language is something I always find so interesting. It's like adding a whole other dimension to communication.
Absolutely.
So we've got cultural unity, political influence, shared writing, but diverse spoken forms, and now these like incredible tonal variations. It feels almost impossible to like pin down a definitive answer to the what is Chinese question.
You've hit the nail on the head. And honestly, that's okay.
Right.
Trying to like force these languages into neat little boxes, it kind of does a disservice to their complexity.
Right.
Instead of searching for that single right answer, it's more about like appreciating the nuance.
I like that appreciation over like absolute definition.
Exactly.
Because like trying to define a color, but you're only acknowledging one shade.
Yeah.
There's a whole spectrum of fascinating detail to uncover. So if even like linguists and scholars, if they have trouble, neatly categorizing these Sinitic languages, how should we as, curious language enthusiasts, how should we even approach this topic?
Think of it as like embracing the ambiguity.
Right.
Instead of getting caught up in those labels,
Right.
focus on the journey of discovery.
Okay.
Dive into the history, the cultural context, the unique linguistic features of each like branch of that Sinitic family tree.
So it's more about understanding the why behind the what.
Yeah.
Like, why are these languages even categorized this way?
Exactly.
What historical or political forces have, like, shaped how they've evolved? That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And this kind of linguistic blurring, it's not unique to Sinitic languages.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We see it with Arabic,
Wow.
with the Slavic languages, even with, like, the Romance languages we talked about earlier.
Are you telling me that even my Romance language example has, like, hidden depths?
Absolutely. Take Italian and Spanish, for example.
Okay.
They share that common ancestor in Latin.
Right.
And while they're considered separate languages today, there are regions where the dialects, they blur the lines so much that speakers can actually understand each other surprisingly easily.
You're blowing my mind here. It's like realizing that the world of language is so much more, like, fluid and interconnected than we often give it credit for.
It really is.
It's not just about like these strict definitions,
Right.
but about recognizing the interplay of like history, culture, politics, even geography.
Now you're getting it. And the more we learn about these nuances, the more we can appreciate the diversity of human expression and the interconnectedness of our shared history.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive so far. It's amazing how much complexity can be packed into a single word, like, Chinese.
It really goes to show that language is never truly static. It's always evolving and adapting and reflecting the ever-changing world around us.
And that journey of evolution is what makes exploring language so captivating. As we start to wrap up our deep dive today, is there one key takeaway you hope our listener walks away with? You could boil it all down to one key insight. What would it be?
I think the most important thing to remember is that Chinese isn't this monolith. It's an umbrella term, much like, Romance languages.
Right.
Encompassing this huge, rich tapestry of linguistic diversity.
It's like we've uncovered this secret world hidden in plain sight. We often talk about language as a tool for communication.
Right.
But this deep dive has really highlighted how it's so much more than that.
Absolutely.
It's a reflection of history. It's a marker of culture. It can even be a tool of political influence.
Precisely. And we've really only just scratched the surface today.
Yeah.
But I hope this exploration has kind of sparked a curiosity, in our listener to keep digging.
Oh, yeah.
To keep questioning and to keep marveling at the ways that language shapes our world.
It definitely has for me. This is one of those deep dives that leaves me with like more questions than answers, but in the best way possible. Yeah. I'm already like itching to learn more about like the nuances of Cantonese tones or, delve into the historical evolution of the Wu languages.
And that's the beauty of it. It's a journey of lifelong learning.
Right.
And there's always something new to discover in the vast landscape of human language.
That's so true. Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this fascinating deep dive. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this journey into the intricate world of Chinese. Remember, language is anything but simple, and that's what makes exploring it so rewarding. Until next time, keep those brain cells buzzing.
Hello everybody and welcome back. Before I left, I promised you that I will explain to you why I said that Hokkien, Cantonese and Hakka are languages and at the same time, they are dialects. But first of all, let's move on to language first. Why are they languages? And in order to understand why they are languages, we need to understand what are languages. And in the definition of language and dialects, we are going to look at it from two perspectives. One is the linguistic perspective, and the other is the socio-political perspective. Yes, these two words, language and dialects, are governed by these two perspectives, and I will explain this perspective to you. Let's start with language. From the linguistic perspective, what is a language? A language is a form of communication by sound. Yes, we can talk about written language, but here we are going to focus on the spoken language. So what is a spoken language? It's a form of communication by sound. And this is how we segregate one language from another language. By right, a language is standing alone, one from the other. In other words, there is no mutual intelligibility between two different languages. Mutual intelligibility means able to understand one another. For example, if I speak Hokkien, and I do not speak Cantonese, I would not be able to understand what a person is saying when he speaks Cantonese. In other words, Hokkien and Cantonese are not mutually intelligible. When two tongues, two forms of speeches are not mutually intelligible, from the linguistic perspective, they are separate languages. And as a result, Mandarin and Hokkien, they are as well not mutually intelligible. So they are separate languages, as are Hokkien to Cantonese, Cantonese to Teochew, Teochew to Hakka, Hakka to Hainanese, Hainanese to Shanghainese, Shanghainese back to Mandarin. They are all not mutually intelligible. That is to say, everybody who speaks that language will not be able to understand a person who speaks the other language. And so, from the linguistic perspective, that is what we call as language and not dialect. Dialect, from the linguistic perspective, is a variant of the language. That means a variety of the language. Usually, when there are variants, a person who speaks two different variants of the same language is able to understand each other, even though it's not 100% mutual intelligibility. So I can understand a person who speaks Singapore Hokkien, for example, even though he may use some words that are outside my vocabulary, or it may be in my vocabulary, but in Penang Hokkien, we do not use those words, or we do not express ourselves that way. So that is variance. So Singapore Hokkien would be a variety of Hokkien, Penang Hokkien would be a variety of Hokkien, and Medan Hokkien would be a variety of Hokkien. So we can also say that Penang Hokkien and Medan Hokkien both trace their roots to Changzhou dialect of Hokkien. But over time, these two are going to fall away, branch away. Why? Because of environmental circumstances. So we in Penang are going to be engulfed by the way we speak in Penang, whereas the folks in Medan will be surrounded by the way people speak in Medan or in Sumatra. So over time, Penang Hokkien are going to adopt loan words from the languages around it, and so too will Medan Hokkien. And so 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, these two languages are going to move further and further apart, even though in the beginning they are one and the same. They came from the same group of Changzhou settlers who were the pioneers in settling in this part of the world. But over time, they diverged, and that is what I would regard in the linguistic perspective as dialects. So, from the linguistic perspective, a dialect is a variety or a variant of a language. So, that is how we look at it from the linguistic perspective. So, from a linguistic perspective, Mandarin, Cantonese, and so on are all stand-alone languages. They are not, you can't say that Cantonese is a dialect of Mandarin. That would be incorrect. But sometimes we have to look at it from the socio-political perspective. And socio-political perspective come into play more than once, repeatedly. Let's take, for example, British English. Is it a language? You will say, yeah, British English is a language. How about American English? Is American English also a language? Yeah, American English is also a language. But isn't American English a dialect of British English? Well, if you look at it from a linguistic perspective, you can say that American English is traced back to British English. If the Britons do not speak English, then it's quite unlikely that the Americans will be speaking English. So if you just say that the English don't speak English, then the Americans would not be speaking English. So in that linguistic perspective, you can say that yes, American English would be a dialect of British English. However, in common use, we don't look at it from the linguistic perspective. Here, we are looking at it from the socio-political perspective. And often, it's the socio-political perspective that triumphs the linguistic perspective. It's the socio-political perspective is the one that people want you to say. As a result, English, British English, is a language. American English is also a language because they want it to be that way. Now we look at Sinitic languages. Sinitic languages, that is to say, the language of the Han Chinese, such as Mandarin, Cantonese, Hokkien, Hakka, and so on. Many of you say that these are dialects. I mean, Cantonese and so on are dialects, but Mandarin is a language. I'm not sure where you are taught this, but to a certain extent, from the socio-political perspective, yes, Cantonese, Hokkien, Hakka, and so on, but not Mandarin, these are considered dialects. And why is it dialects? Well, the second definition of the word dialect from the socio-political perspective is a language here, language that is not the official language of the nation. So, Mandarin has official status. The rest of these languages do not have official status. So when it does not have official status, and here I have to detour and explain the word official, because some people use the word official without actually understanding what does official mean. So instead of talking about Sinitic languages, let's talk about English for a moment. Official means something that is used in the office, that is used by the government in printing out something that it wants to show it to you. So the government would be printing it in the language which is the official language. Therefore, in Malaysia, the official languages are Malay and English. So you can find government documents in Malay and English. In Malaysia, Mandarin is not an official language. Therefore, you don't find government documentation in Mandarin. If they put it in Mandarin, it is in the unofficial capacity. They can do it if they want to. But if they were to do it in Mandarin, it would be in the unofficial capacity. English and Malay are official languages, and so whether it's on your income tax form and so on, when you see in Malay and English appearing, even in government website, it is done in the official capacity. That is Malaysia. Going back to China, the official language for China is presently the modern standard Mandarin. And the modern standard Mandarin is therefore the official language. All other non-official languages are known as dialects. And this is how it is in the socio-political perspective, and it's the same socio-political perspective that is adopted by Singapore. In Singapore, when the former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew states that speaking in dialects, and when he says speaking in dialects, he means speaking in Hokkien, Teochew, Cantonese, and so on. He is approaching it from the socio-political perspective. That is to say, in Singapore, Mandarin has official status, but not these other languages. That is what is meant. It does not mean that Mandarin is the language while Cantonese, Hokkien, and Teochew are its dialects. These languages just are not the dialects of Mandarin. Okay? Be clear that Mandarin has official status. Therefore, those languages that do not have official status are regarded as dialect from the social political perspective. However, it does not mean that Hokkien, Cantonese, Teochew are dialects of Mandarin. So, maybe some teachers somewhere learn it halfway. They got it halfway right. And so they explain it to students in a halfway right, half-baked manner. As a result, student generation or decades after decades of students think that Hokkien, Cantonese, and Teochew and the rest are dialects of Mandarin. That is wrong. And in my subsequent video, I'm going to share with you the history of Mandarin and also eventually the history of Chinese languages so that you have a clear perspective of why and how we got to where we are today. Yeah, we have to, by having this clarity, you will know how all the Sinitic languages, here, Sinitic languages, not Sinitic dialects, Sinitic languages come into being, and why at the same time the Sinitic languages, a whole big family of languages, can also be grouped under dialect groups. This is called dialect groups. So even Hokkien and so on are within dialect groups such as the Ming dialect groups, the Yue dialect groups, and so on. So those are coming up. But for this particular video, I want to address the question of Hokkien, Cantonese, Hakka, are they languages? You can say, yes, they are languages. Why? Because they are all standalone. They are not mutually intelligible. You cannot, a person who speaks Hokkien cannot immediately understand a person who speaks Cantonese. There is not enough mutual intelligibility for them to understand each other. From the linguistic perspective again, dialects are such that the mutual intelligibility is so high that a person who speaks Penang Hokkien can understand a person who speaks Singapore Hokkien, and if you go further away, the mutual intelligibility will be reduced. A person who speaks Penang Hokkien will be able to understand a person who speaks Taiwanese Hokkien, but not as much as Singapore Hokkien. The further we are, the distance, then the mutual intelligibility will be reduced. That is from the linguistic perspective. And from the socio-political perspective, a dialect is a language that has now no official status in the nation. And if I want to bring this up also. So if a language has no official status, it is considered a dialect. So what about English in China? In China, a lot of people learn English, however, it is not an official language. So can you therefore say that English is a dialect in China? Yes or no? Well, technically you can say that English is a dialect in China, but no. We are only referring to native languages. If the language is indigenous to that country, such as Hokkien, Cantonese, Hakka are indigenous to China, then yes, you can say that these are dialects because Chinese or Mandarin has official status. However, English, a language on its own, does not have official status in China, but it is also not a native language of China. It is not indigenous to China. Therefore, English is not a dialect. English is still a language as its own self, on its own right globally. So you can take English anywhere in the world and it will still be considered a language, be it British English or American English. And so therefore, that's our conclusion for this video. I hope you enjoy it, and I also hope that you going forward will be able to explain to people in future if you come across the situation where you have to explain Hokkien, Cantonese, Hakka, are these languages or dialects? You will be able to explain it correctly and tell them that these are considered languages because so and so. These are considered dialects because so and so. Okay? I hope if you cannot remember everything, then run through all this video all over again. And in future videos, we are going to explore other aspects of the history of Chinese languages, particularly as it pertains to the Chinese people in West Malaysia and Singapore. Thank you so much for watching, and okay, don't forget to subscribe to this particular channel so that you will be notified every time I put out a new video. Okay, so I'll see you again in future. Thank you very much. Kam sia lu, JJ.